I think we can get started. We're delighted to welcome you all to Seattle here in person in the room, and many folks online as well by Zoom, to something we've never done before. Launch an institute. You might be saying, in fact, I will be stunned if you're not saying, what does that mean? We said that a lot. And we're going to try and share with you what we hope what our vision is, and where we hope we will go with that. Okay, so these are just a few fun pictures of some of the teams that have gotten together over at various times around the world with a total focus, or at least a partial focus, on Merkel cell carcinoma. And today, I, Paul Nghiem, and Krista LaChance, Rima Kulikauskis, and Candace Church will be presenting on what this institute is and how we hope very much that you all will be involved, and this will be an impactful thing for patients and people around the world who are interested in this cancer. So here is what we'll tackle in a little bit over a half hour or so. Start with some thank yous, and then introduce what the Institute actually is and why we are creating it, and end with the fundraising that has allowed us to get to this point, and that we believe and hope will further accelerate the field going forward. But now I'd like to start with something fun. And that is our newly designed logo behind the curtain here. And we have spent a number of months selecting this with help from University of Washington Creative Communications. And so without further ado, I'll first show it to you, and then I'll tell you why we selected it. Ooh, thank you, thank you. There was a plant in the audience. Thank you. We needed the ooh, yes, excellent. So Merkel Cell Carcinoma Collaborative, or MC3, has that image because it suggests a global nature of collaboration. It suggests that the different people that are forming this structure are maybe different sizes, different ages, maybe different phases in their career. Maybe some of them are patients, maybe some of them are physicians and scientists, but it mostly suggests that when they come together, they're stronger, and that they interact very closely together. So we did put some thinking into this and saw some more clunky ones, but this is what we have settled on at this point, and hope that it symbolizes that together our impact can be greater. So I'd like to thank some of the folks who have come together to establish an institute. We didn't know what that meant, actually, but there is a formal way to do that through the University of Washington Office of Research. And then we partnered with all these folks here. Our Fred Hutch philanthropy team, we'll be talking about them more, super important in moving this forward. Our UW-Durham administrative team. This administratively sits in the Department of Dermatology, and then our goal is to touch folks all over the place and help it be impactful. All of these folks, mostly in our lab, helped with the logistics of getting today's event going. So thank you so much to them, including Gourmando Catering, who will give us our nice heavy appetite, heavy hors d'oeuvres after we finish this. And at this point now, I'd like to welcome up Andy Dickson, who has come, I think, at 1 in the morning. Thank you so much, Andy, from Florida, to talk about and celebrate his beautiful daughter, Kelsey, who at age 9 developed Merkel cell carcinoma. And since then, he has been working very hard to make an impact in her honor. Andy, thank you. All of these pictures have Kelsey.
Welcome, everyone. Good evening. Everybody here locally as well as online. It's a privilege and an honor to be here for the launch of the Institute. What an amazing opportunity. My name is Andy Dickson, and I'm from Miami, Florida. I brought the sunshine, but not the cold weather. And I serve as Senior Vice President for Hudson Insurance Group, which is a subsidiary of Odyssey Group. Odyssey Group's been promoting research or promoting Merkel cell research and offering support for Merkel cell research over the last 10 years. I wanted to share with you how that came about. Essentially, in January of 2014, as Dr. Nghiem said, my daughter Kelsey contracted Merkel cell carcinoma, a very rare skin cancer, as you know. And back then, 2014, 10 years ago, it was unheard of. I mean, we understand that she was actually the first young child in the US to get the disease, and our doctors were stumped. You know, we work with our local oncologist in Miami, which are really good doctors in Miami, but he didn't know what to do. So he sent out samples, and we get one opinion. Okay, let me get a second opinion, a third opinion, fourth opinion. Oh, it is Merkel cell. Okay, that doesn't make sense, but let's move forward. So at the time, there were limited opportunities for treating the disease. And we started out with chemotherapy at the time. That was a protocol. And we started getting a positive response. So, okay, great. We're getting a positive response. It's working. Went into remission a few months later in May of 2014. And we're all celebrating. Everything's great. 6 weeks later, it came back with a vengeance. I mean, very, very strongly came back. And that was the summer of 2014. We're like, what do we do? You know, we're kind of stuck. And so we consulted with Dana-Farber in Boston. We consulted with a couple other folks, and we found a clinical trial for an immunotherapy. And okay, let's try that. It was a very, it was a experimental clinical trial. And so we worked with that at Rutgers in New Jersey. And Small World Department, Dr. Nghiem was actually one of the ones that approved the FDA to fast track that so we could actually move it forward and get it done. And unfortunately, it didn't work. In September of 2014, we lost our battle. But you know, I couldn't have made it through that dark season without, you know, the love and support of my wife Raquel, my son Kyle, who's now 25, and the unwavering support of the Odyssey group. And you know, I was very motivated at that time. You know, we need to fight back. We need to really make a difference. So in 2015, our amazing CEO, who's actually now the CEO or the president of Fairfax level, Brian Young, embraced the vision that we had. I said, look, I want to make a difference. Let's move forward with some research. And we hooked up with Dr. Nghiem in 2015 with $1 million grant. And we pushed the research forward, and we made huge strides. We had two new immunotherapies come out, tons of research papers, tons of collaboration in a disease that was very, very rare, not well known. We were so impressed that we renewed again another $1 million in 2019. And then again in 2023, recently, a couple of years ago, we really wanted to move the ball further down the field and said, let's bump it up to 1.5 million. So in all, we've donated 3.5 million directed towards Dr. Nghiem and all the great work that everybody's done as part of the lab. And we really, really made a difference. You know, very, very impressed with what you have done. And not only the research, the collaboration, and the Institute is a perfect example of that, you know, moving forward in the right direction. And I'm just so proud of all the stuff that we've done and all of the support that we've given you has been extraordinary for me personally, as well as, you know, business-wise with Odyssey Group. So again, very proud to be here, very happy to be here, and thank you all for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Andy. Here are the updated pictures of Andy's beautiful family at this time. And we're very appreciative of what you've allowed us to do, collaborating with many people to make impacts in the field with the support of the Odyssey Group. So thank you so much. So why form an institute? I will tell you that when Krista, Rima, and Candace first came to me maybe 1.5 years ago and said, we should make an institute, I kind of listened and I said, nah, we don't need that. And they kind of went away and came back a few months later with really something that knocked this idiot over, and said, yeah, we do need that. And what had happened? Well, 20 or so years ago, I started a lab with 3 people or something, and that's grown a lot to 25 or more. And we now do these really weird things for a lab. We take care of patients directly or indirectly. We're integrating with patients really around the world, helping them get on research trials, taking their blood and doing what used to be experimental things and now are standard things to say, is your cancer coming back or not? Doing education with this website we started more than 2 decades ago, an annual dinner meeting of more than 300 people and more than 100 collaborators around the world. Those are all kind of weird things, in addition to giving money away to our collaborators whose work is super important, and they don't have short-term funding right then from the NIH. So really weird things. So turns out it makes sense to form an institute, because this is going to amplify those things. It will be the cohesive structure to allow, as you're going to hear from Krista, Rima, and Candace, granting programs, like at least pilot grants, managing our huge numbers of specimens, helping other labs get their fundraising successfully. We can now write, not just write, from me or from my lab, yeah, we're happy to collaborate with you. We can say, you're a member of this institute. We have these samples that will be relevant for your study, and we are committing to that. And we hope that and believe that that will really help them get their own fundraising and advance the field. Our mission is we collaborate to cure Merkel cell carcinoma, and we thought very carefully about our values. They start and finish with the patient in mind, and that is not a bug, it's a feature, as they say. Our patients give us the best ideas of what the field needs, because we just watch what they're struggling with. And then we collectively innovate and say, what can we do that's different? We know that with a rare cancer, no one can do this by themselves, and no lab, no even university can do it by themselves. So that's broad collaboration. Then we work very hard to disseminate that information through websites and meetings and newsletters and things. And then, of course, it's really all wrapped up with very meticulous integrity about the kind of research we do, who we work with, the standards that we have for what we do and how we do it. And those are things that we hold very honestly and strongly. Who are we? What's going to make up this institute? Well, there's staff. As I said, it's going to be administered through the Department of Dermatology. And so our administrative team is here today, and we thank them for all of their efforts in getting this going. We have research coordinators and our wonderful philanthropy team. The leadership, you'll be hearing from the 4 of us who are taking on various kind of detailed, significant roles in making this thing work. We have a wonderful advisory board who are here today and also online and such, of patient advocates, scientists, and clinicians. And then a lot of trainees at all levels. Our 2 biggest training programs are our clinical research fellows, who literally touch hundreds of patients every week in terms of email and communications and helping them with their management. And then our undergraduate research assistants, which Krista will tell you more about that amazing program as well. And then the biggest piece is all of you, members in various contexts, maybe patient advocates, maybe people who want to donate time or money or tumor tissue or blood or stool. That's that's a big one these days. We're really learning that the gut is a very important part of health, immune health and cancer health. We have our Merkel cell carcinoma advisory board here. Dr. Becker's in Germany. Everybody else is based in the United States. We have many collaborators all over the place. Dr. DeLugos is here today from Michigan. Anj, welcome. We'll talk a little bit more about his amazing work in advancing this field. And we have multiple patient advocates as well who care deeply about this and have bring all kinds of professional experience and perspective in how we advance things. So I'd now like to turn it over to Krista LaChance, our Director of People and Programs.
Thank you. So my name is Krista LaChance, and I'm excited to share with you the 2 websites that the Institute will manage, as well as some exciting programs. So many of you know merkelcell.org. This is our educational website that patients and physicians use to learn about the disease, to learn about where to get treated, learn about upcoming clinical trials, as well as helpful resources like where can I find a Merkel cell carcinoma specialist. And what we have just created is a newly established Institute website. And this website is meant for our members to provide ways that we can collaborate and work together. And I want to give a special shout out to Mac and Ankita, who are both in the audience. And they've worked tirelessly to update and manage these websites, which are excellent tools for both our patients and our members. And throughout the presentation, we'll be referring to the Institute website. So you'll see this navigation bar throughout. So the 2 training programs that Dr. Nghiem alluded to are the clinical fellowship and the undergrad research program. So for the clinical fellows, these are for medical students or physicians, and they spend 1 to 2 years in the Institute. And their primary role is clinical care and helping Dr. Nghiem manage this heavy load of complex patients. One of the key things that they do is they host and manage this cross-institutional tumor board, which invites doctors of different disciplines from around the country to talk about complicated cases. And together they work and find a comprehensive plan for those patients. The other training program is the undergraduate research program. And this is for University of Washington students. And they learn the fundamentals of clinical research, from data abstraction to data entry, to then putting together projects, presenting them at national meetings, and ultimately writing them into manuscripts. And really, this program is a launch pad for many to go into medical school or graduate programs. And we're really proud to have these students work with us. They're really the backbone of our research. I want to also highlight that this is a highly competitive program. This year, we had over 300 applicants for 3 spots. And we can't always match and accept all these students. So we often pass them on to partnering labs like UW and the Hutch. And we hear back from them that they're so grateful that we were able to recruit great students. So this is a recent photo of some of them at a holiday gathering. And lastly, I really want to talk about our community outreach. The Institute is really proud of how we interact with the greater community. The first is the Merkel Celebration Dinner, which many of you have attended. And this is an opportunity to gather patients, their loved ones, as well as our research collaborators to learn about updates in the field and have a sense of community and gather together. And this is a photo just of our team, and not pictured are about the 150 or 200 guests that are in the audience. We also host a MCC multi-center interest group meeting meant for scientists and researchers to share emerging data and get direction on their projects. As I mentioned before, we have our merkelcell.org, our educational website. And one of the very interesting features of it is that we summarize literature, not written just by our team, but by outside writers and outside scientists. And we circulate that in a monthly newsletter. So if you want to learn more about Merkel cell carcinoma and what's going on, please sign up for that newsletter. And with that, I'm going to now pass it on to Rima Kulakowskis, who is the Director of Specimen Repository.
Thank you, Krista. So hi, everybody. Thank you for being here tonight. As a scientist who studied tumor biology for the last 10 years in the Nghiem lab, the research tools page in our website is of particular interest to me. You can find the information on our MC3 Institute website by navigating on the navigation bar to the research tools section. The most prominent tool we have to share is the MCC repository, which is comprised of the clinical database and the specimen collection. The clinical database has information on over 1,900 patients and about 200 data fields per patient. And this data is curated by our undergraduate research assistants that Krista mentioned. The database is paired with a specimen collection of over 60,000 blood, tissue, and stool samples. And we want to share these resources with you. Other tools that we have to offer are data sets that we're developing about sequencing, spatial proteomics, and transcriptomics. And we also have cell lines, virus positive and negative human Merkel cell lines, many, which include many from the University of Michigan members of the Institute. I know that Ange de Bloch is here in the audience. Hello. And their group in Michigan are the leading experts in establishing cell lines from Merkel tumors. So as I said before, we're very excited to offer these to people, collaborators. And if you go to the research tools page on the MC3 Institute website, you'll find a form where you can request any of these tools and just by giving us a short description of your project. Let's talk about membership. Similarly, on the MC3 Institute website navigation bar, you'll see a spot for membership. And within that page, there is a place to click through and submit an application for membership. So in addition to the resources that I mentioned on the last slide, we think that having your profile on our website will promote networking and collaboration. And we also hope that you share news on this page. And we're talking about making announcements or news that things you'd like to celebrate or job listings or any similar news. Our expectations are pretty straightforward. We want to collaborate. And by that, we mean we'd like you to attend MC3 Institute meetings or international Merkel meetings or share trainees or just work on projects together. And we simply cite, we'd ask you to cite the MC3 in your publications and grant proposals where appropriate. And this photo is of some of our members enjoying some time together at the European Merkel meeting in Hamburg last year. Okay. And I'll send it back to Paul to talk about 3 exciting initiatives of our Institute.
Thanks, Grandma. So we were working on something like 50 different projects, and it's kind of confusing and overwhelming at times, but we picked 3 today that are interesting, exciting, we believe will change the way Merkel patients are treated in the near future, and all of which will really benefit from the Institute to drive them forward. One of them is improving how and when and to whom we give radiation after surgery. The second one is we now have a new and better way to detect recurrences early, Merkel recurrences early. We do not know whether we should treat those patients early or not. I'll explain what that means in a moment. And finally, the impact of lifestyle changes involving appropriate sleep, exercise, and diet have now, by many studies in other cancers and looking at the immune response to cancer, been made really clear that those are life-saving things. They improve the quality of the life, they improve the quality of the immune system, and decrease the chance that the cancer will come back, et cetera, et cetera. So it's time to put those things into place. So I'll start with the radiation concept. And we're talking about something called single fraction radiation therapy, or SFRT for short, for what we call low-risk Merkel tumors. For higher risk tumors that are really big ones and that involve lymph nodes and such, we know we've got to do the 5-week extensive thing. But single fraction, we believe, has a really important role in the management of many cases of Merkel. So what is conventional versus single fraction? Right now, when you get your Merkel cut out, you then after surgery is something called adjuvant radiation. The only way that the current national guidelines say you can give that is 5 weeks treatment, 25 visits. Nothing else is mentioned as an option. We think that should change based on data that I'll show you, and I'm confident it will change soon. But this is not 2 gray per dose, it's 8 gray, and you only give 1 dose. So it is a bigger dose, but it's only 1 visit instead of 5 days a week for 5 weeks, which if you're older and live far away from a cancer center, is actually impossible in a lot of cases. And especially when it's not necessarily life-saving, it's just going to decrease your risk that the cancer comes back. A lot of people just completely forego it. So partly because of that, because it's incredibly convenient, 1 dose, 82% of our patients didn't have any side effects from this, as compared to 100% of patients will have side effects conventional. Most of them are not that bad. Some skin redness, some fatigue, maybe a little bit of blistering, maybe that usually calms down. But a moderate number of people will have persistent leg or arm swelling after they get radiation. And it can also affect wounds and such. So it's not a joke, the amount of morbidity from these 25 treatments and such. So what are the data? How well does it work among 310 patients in our Seattle cohort? These are, again, low-risk patients, and 9% of them will have their cancer come back right next to the primary site. And again, the cancer was fully taken out. They didn't have immune suppression. They didn't have a bunch of other risk factors. We could call them low risk. And so that's 9% adjacent local recurrence. If we give conventional RT, which is often given for those folks, we cut that down. That's very statistically significant, only 2%. And for single fraction, I don't want to state that it's better in terms of efficacy than conventional, but it's statistically identical. It's markedly less, and numerically it's better, but it may be partly because we only had 43 patients in this arm. But it works really well with almost no side effects. Okay, so what are the problems then? Why do we need an international single fraction radiation therapy study for Merkel led by this institute? Well, the current data is only based here in Seattle. And if I talk to anybody outside of Seattle, to a radiation oncologist, and say, I think you should consider this, part of their brain says, well, we know about single fraction. We use that for other things. Yeah, I know radiation, Merkel's kind of radiation sensitive, but I can't do that. You know, there's no data. I don't, you know, our center doesn't do that. So it's a very uphill battle at this point for the most part. What we want to do is partner with 10 or more sites. We want to help coordinate the logistics and provide biostatistical support so we can ask in a prospective way for patients who say, oh, well, I can't do the conventional. This is too much for me. You know, it has to be an informed conversation with patients. But then we just want them to track very carefully how many risk factors did that patient have? Did it come back? Did it not? What side effects did they have? And we believe then we're going to move to what we think is going to be the right thing in the future: less radiation given sooner for more patients, to decrease their side effects, decrease the risk of recurrence, and decrease the hassles and everything. So we'll see, but that's our vision on that project, and it's something that the Institute is uniquely set up to do that we're very excited about. Second one, the recurrences. Okay, so here is our collaboration across these 6 centers that you can see here, and you know well, famous cancer centers, led by Dr. Akaike and Dr. Zeba, who's on the call. 24 investigators, 319 patients, 6 sites, all that say ctDNA or circulating tumor DNA, which is a personalized genetic blood test, works really well for early detection of both virus-positive Merkel and virus-negative Merkel. The other blood test that you may or may not know of that we developed here in Seattle as well looks for Merkel virus antibodies, and that only works in the cases that are caused by the virus. This can work across any patient with Merkel, it's now, because of the strength of the data in this paper, being broadly adopted. The 2025 National Comprehensive Cancer Network guidelines specifically list this as a good way to check whether the cancer is coming back or not. And it will quickly replace scans. On our team here in Seattle and many of the teams around the country, it's replacing routine scans because it's more sensitive, it's more specific, you get fewer false positives. There's no radiation, there's no contrast dye, it's less expensive, you don't have to travel to a major center. You can get this blood test drawn in your home. That's what most of our patients do. Okay, great. Then we have a dilemma. This comes up frustratingly often, okay? Heartbeat skip for a moment. If ctDNA is positive, I'm not touching anything. So I don't know. I'm not sure if people online can still see it. No, they lose it too. Okay, so something really sketchy is happening intermittently. Is Nick still here? Okay.
I think he pulled it out for the next.
Okay. Great. That's weird. Okay, okay, no one touched, okay.
Don't even breathe here.
No breathing. So we have a dilemma. Now you're awake. The drama of tech. If ctDNA is positive, so you have a molecular level, this is a low level of the cancer coming back, but the scans are negative and the doc can't find anything on the skin or in the lymph nodes, we tell patients, just wait, don't do anything. Well, we now know from this study, greater than 90% of those people will have their cancer come back within 1 to 2 years. But we just wait. So what we want to do then is address this dilemma and ask, should high-risk patients get immunotherapy? Dr. Bhatia is in the back. Many of you know Dr. Bhatia. He is leading one of the trials that is called adjuvant immunotherapy. And in these kinds of trials, which there are about 5 or 6 from Australia, the United States, and Europe that are being analyzed now, and we'll soon have an answer as to how well they work. But the concept is based on your stage, like it was a big tumor, or that it spread to the lymph nodes or something like that, there might be a 30% or a 50 or a 70% chance that that person will recur. You take that information, have a conversation with the patient, and this is done for adjuvant therapy in many kinds of cancers. You give the treatment when there's a risk the cancer is going to come back, but you don't know that it will, and you can't currently detect that it's there. That means, on that second bullet, 30 to 70%, depending on your stage, will never have had it come back if this is being used as it's intended, because you need to give it to patients who would have it come back as well as wouldn't, in order to hopefully decrease the chance that it's going to come back by, let's say, maybe 50%. In theory, ctDNA could improve this or modulate this. And here's the proposed trial. So patients who have had surgery and radiation and have never had systemic therapy, so did not get chemotherapy, did not get immunotherapy, didn't get adjuvant therapy initially, but then develop evidence in their blood that the cancer is coming back. And then we know it's got a 90% chance of coming back in the next year or two in a way that we can see it, but it's not done that yet. The scans are negative and the physical exam is negative. So these are people that we have that have what we call subclinical disease. Can't find it in the clinic, but we can find it molecularly. Those folks, if they're interested, would get randomized to either standard of care, which is observation, or immunotherapy. And the Southwest Oncology Group, National Cancer Institute Clinical Trials Group has seen the initial proposal for this. They loved it. So they gave us one of the initial 5 lights. There are 5 stages. They gave us a green light in the first of many stages for developing this, but we're optimistic it will move forward. Then those patients any of those patients would then, in an ongoing way, get the ctDNA test done and have scans every 3 months. And we would be looking for, is the cancer coming back? Is it coming back sooner, slower, et cetera? And how do patients do over the longer term? An interesting point is, if we give the immune therapy, will we be able to revert some or many of those patients to being negative by ctDNA, like clean up the microscopic disease by stimulating the immune response? And I will tell you, if you think, oh, if I were in this situation, I would definitely want to get immunotherapy, I'll tell you it's a little more complicated than that. There's evidence in the immune system from melanoma and other settings that if the tumor is visible and then you give an immune stimulant, you get a better immune response than if the tumor is really low and invisible, and then you give the immune stimulation. It sort of makes sense. You're going to train all these soldiers and such with the immune system in order to, and you'll get a bigger, better army if there was enough to kind of fight there. So it's a complicated thing. And we think the only way to know whether this should be done or not is to actually study it properly. The interesting implication of this is that patients would actually wait to decide if they want to be participating in this, because you wouldn't do this if your ctDNA is negative. And we know this cancer comes back after 1 or 2 or 3 or sometimes 5 years. You could just wait to make the decision later and take a look at the data and such at that point. So if you're interested, please join us in this early planning phase of this trial. Like I said, there's many more stages as we work to make this argument to the NCI and the Southwest Oncology Group, which is actually all of the bioinformatics team is based here in Seattle for that trial group. And finally, this last one's really quite simple, but I think quite impactful. Sleep, exercise, and diet are extremely important in fighting this cancer. Wanted to just mention and welcome Dr. Kang, who just joined the faculty here at Fred Hutch, having been at Dana-Farber until recently, and he's got a special interest in this aspect in particular. That is, how does exercise prevent cancer? And it turns out, like many things, it's really complicated, but it absolutely does prevent and diminish the risk that it will come back. And there's probably many mechanisms for that. But at this point, we know that's good. We know that a diet that's high in fiber, in particular, supports the diverse bugs in our gut. And the greater diversity of bugs in our gut supports our immune system to fight cancer and give us better health overall. And sleep just helps in so many different ways to promote our health. So we want to work with Dr. Kang, with others in the field around the world who have characterized these things carefully. There's a lot of unintuitive things like probiotics actually are detrimental. It's weird, whereas the fiber is favorable in terms of the fight against cancer. So a lot needs to be known, but we know a lot. It's time to help people advance their health through these approaches. So I'll now turn it over to Candace, who is our Director of Scientific Research.
All right, thank you for that, Paul. And thank you everybody for coming and joining us. I'm very excited that you're all here and we are launching all of these lovely programs. So Krista told you about a few programs that are already established and have been happening for a while. And Paul talked about these new initiatives that are in the process. Some of them are further along in the process than others. I'm going to talk to you about things that we are planning to launch. So I get the exciting pieces of unveiling things, which is fun. So the first item here is a pilot research award program, which Paul alluded to earlier. This is really driven and focused on younger investigators who might have 1 or 2 of their first research projects, or they have something new that doesn't have a lot of preliminary data yet that can really be competitive for these larger grants. So we would like to be able to help lift up and move forward some of this early MCC research by doing some pilot awards. So this will be an annual program. We're looking at 1 to 2 awards per year, and this will be peer reviewed. Applications will be open to our membership. And so we're planning on the first funding cycle later this year. So pay attention to our website and sign up to our newsletter. to get the announcements for when the application opens. So that's the first thing that we have in progress. We have 3 more things kind of in the works in the background here. We're looking at starting a mentorship program, and this is aimed at trainees being able to get additional mentorship in various areas that they're interested in growing, really for career development and for themselves. So we would like to facilitate matching with mentors who are interested in helping our trainees with their training. And then we're also looking at doing a trainee travel award. And this is aimed at supporting young scientists who want to go to conferences to present their work and get feedback, do networking and learning, and also maybe go to courses that they have to travel to for specialty courses. So this will help offset a little bit of the travel required, hotel costs and things like that. So we like, as you can tell, we really like to support our trainees and the next generation of scientists and physicians. And then the last one here is a patient travel fund. This is aimed at patients who have to travel long distances to get to cancer centers and get to MCC specialists to help them be able to offset the cost of travel a little bit so they can actually have those visits that are super important, especially in the early stages of their disease. This will be a need-based program, and we're very excited about this. So we welcome ideas and feedback on these programs. If you have other ideas and areas of need that you think of, by all means, talk to us. We love to hear ideas. And again, just sign up for our newsletter and check out our website so you can be up to date on everything that's happening. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to Paul, who's going to talk about fundraising.
And I'll also mention that we're coming close to the end, so people can think of any questions you may have or put them in online. But in terms of fundraising, I want to thank Megan, Sherry, and Katie, who are here today. And note that, and we always get questions, well, what's the relationship between Fred Hutch and University of Washington? And the bottom line is it's close. It's entirely collaborative in terms of oncology. The research is done mostly at the Hutch, but there's some here at UW. And then the fundraising now is entirely done at the Hutch, but then it is shared back to the program that is intended for that support. And I'll also point out Christine Chan, who's here, because Christine worked with us for almost a decade, and we're so appreciative of all that she's done. She's moved on to bigger and bigger fields, but Christine, thank you so much for your partnership. Many people here know you very well. So this is really critical for what we hope to do for the Institute. To be honest, we think and hope maybe that the Institute will be a clearer thing than a random lab website or something like that, to actually as a way for people to say, I want to support this field. I want to support research in this area. So fingers crossed that that's another advantage of creating an institute. I know that Pat and Randy are joining us online from California, and they have made the founding Merkel cell carcinoma collaborative donation. And here is what they wrote. When we learned about the plans to expand the work of the lab by opening up a collaboration center, the MC3, we jumped at the chance to help. The MC3, with over 10 institutions and greater than 50 researchers cooperating in world-class research, will allow many more people to experience the wonderful support we received over 4 years ago with Dr. Nghem's lab. Pat and Randy, thank you so much for your generosity and support and vision as we launch this thing that we're all sort of scratching our heads. What are we doing? Is it going to work? But it's going to work. Okay. Thank you very much. So now it's time for questions. So I think, Alex, you have a microphone. You can walk around. If folks have questions in the room, you can raise your hand. And Kate is looking on the Zoom chat in case there are questions, and one has popped up. Brave person asking a first question.
Okay. Sammy has a question in the chat that I can read. She says, I have a question about the no communication order on the NIH, HHS, and other federal government agencies. I heard that it has put a stop to current clinical trials. Is that something you are dealing with at the Hutch?
Yes, Sammy. And thank you for your comment and your concern. We're all trying to remain calm and, just stay calm. There is actually, it's not any one administration at the presidential level. Any administration often has a little bit of a bump as they change. some of the initial bumps that happened within hours of the new administration have already gone away, and we're back to a lot of things being normal at the Veterans Administration Hospital. That was a nerve-wracking moment. I am cautiously very optimistic that the NIH will also be back on track soon. At this moment, no NIH folks are allowed to travel, and they're not allowed to communicate in any official capacity beyond, out to the public and frankly out to the grantees and such. So it has been a stressful week. A lot of things have been canceled, events, meetings, collaborations. I just have to say we're optimistic things are going to calm down soon. We did hear very encouraging news recently about the major NIH grant that we have, and that internally things are looking encouraging, but right now the NIH can't really function properly at all. So more on that later. Okay. Great. No one's raising their hand here. So yeah, one more in the chat.
Larry asks, wondering with a giant database, 1,900 patients with 200 fields, are you using AI tools to look for patterns?
Ooh, such a good question. Thanks, Larry. So Peter? I'm teasing him, but he just did look at our database using AI actually, and not in maybe the way you're thinking, but it turns out it's very tricky to write the code to analyze the data. And we have a wonderful biostats team that does that, but now we don't always have to pester them and have them spend all this time doing something really formally. And Peter, one of our wonderful, clinical research fellows, used ChatGPT with R and some existing code and said, I want to know this about our patients. And you always have to check anything that AI does. You can't believe it as the gospel, but it can write code, it can modulate code, and if you can then check it and verify it, he in just minutes, right, Peter? It was super fast. He was able to get a crude look at what's going on. And you can imagine hundreds of variables, and we got so many different things about the different patients and the treatments they're getting. AI could be a powerful way to find that. So the answer is yes, but with caution. Probably how we should always view AI. Great. Yes, question. We might be able to hear you, or Alex will run back. You raise your hand there, and right in the middle.
Testing.
Oh yeah, definitely people online won't be able to hear. So if you can use the mic, I can repeat, but.
Wouldn't want you to have to repeat it. So I've been graduated by Dr. Nghiem about a year ago. I'm 7.5 years, almost 8 years past my initial prognosis, and it's great. But my question is more about getting the word out to as many as dermatologists as possible about the Institute, and what are the plans, what's the innovation there? Because this was 8 years ago almost, but they did not know about your lab, Dr. Nghiem, and I did find it on my own, and very grateful that I did, because my treatment was excellent. But is that part of this Institute? It's innovative ways to get the word out to dermatologists, so when there's Merkel cell, they know what, who knows how to treat it best.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's been such a frustrating thing for so long, is we still hear stories of patients who were treated by physicians who weren't, frankly, at all familiar with the cancer. But that is so much less common than it used to be, by a huge margin. And I would say it's now the outlier, where a patient has really gone through treatment and they haven't been cared for by a center or even a physician that's really realized this isn't exactly the same as melanoma if you're a dermatologist, and it isn't exactly the same as small cell lung cancer if you're a medical oncologist. That's what everybody in those fields used to think. And now they realize, yeah, this is a unique cancer. So lots of progress has been made. As Krista said, education is a huge mission for the Institute. We want to think of any way that we can, get information out there to the right people at the right time. And any ideas any of you all have, we're open ears still to improve that. But now we're managing sort of 4 websites and that have different sort of overlapping purposes. And more people are going to be members of this institute and kind of aware and giving talks in their hometowns and cities and states and countries about how to best treat this. So I'm really optimistic that education will continue marching forward, but I fear still it's a rare cancer. And that's a hard thing to get the word out, because a lot of docs don't see this very often, and you can't learn about everything that you don't see that often. But very important topic that we're working on.
We have another question in the chat. Maybe we can just provide some additional information, but I'll just read it aloud. For folks who want to donate modest amounts to, in the past, the Nghiem Lab, what's the best way to designate where funds donations should go to? Nghiem Lab, MC3, Hutch, etc.
Great question. And basically, as long as you say it's for Merkel research, it should end up in the same basic place. And so it shouldn't matter is the high level answer to the question. Frankly, we're happy if you donate, maybe a little happier if you donate here, but you were happy if you donate for Merkel, at your local center as well. It just advances what we can do as a field. If you want it to come to our team, which is based at the Hutch and UW, you can, it'll, as long as you say Merkel and or, Nghiem Lab or Institute, it'll go to the same place. Got one in the back and one in the middle, so.
Thank you so much for the great presentation. I wanted to ask, how do you identify new patients for your registry?
Okay, Maya, how do we identify new patients for our registry? That's interesting. It's evolved over time. A number of years ago, we were so desperate to get any patient, data on any patient, that we figured out a way, which we can still do, of remotely enrolling a patient in research. So we just call them up, we send them the forms, we explain to them what's going on, they sign the forms, and then we have access. They've essentially given us access to their medical records and such. We kind of stopped doing that a number of years ago because actually getting the medical records was a huge problem a lot of times. The patients would mean well and such, but actually getting complete medical records was really hard. So now the vast majority of the patients that we get are patients that we see here. In that process, we get all the records that we need for research. So, and right now I would say that we're not limited at 1,900 patients. We're really not limited by the number of patients. We're limited by our ability to ask good questions and gather the relevant data and stay on top of that many patients. So does that answer your question about how, yeah, they really come in, and actually a lot of them come in because they've got a really tough case. And that's when they figure out that, we specialize in this and we specialize in the tough cases. And so the patients and colleagues around the country, we kind of come together, and sometimes we just are commiserating with our colleagues. We're saying, I got to admit it honestly, sometimes we say, we don't have any other ideas at this point. Usually we do, but every now and then we have to say that super frustrating, nasty thing like, I'm sorry, we ran out of ideas. And that's one of the things that motivated me and us years ago, because I used to have to say that all the time. And I don't have to say it that often anymore, and that's really wonderful. But we still have to say it sometimes, and it's a motivator, and then that's actually beneficial to the patient and the team. They're like, okay, we've turned over every rock, and that gives them a little bit of peace. But a lot of times patients come to us, in other words, because they have a tough case, and we do the tumor board that Krista mentioned and that Dr. Bhatia co-leads. And we put our heads together across all the specialties, across all the geographies, and say what's the best thing for a given patient. There's another question, yeah.
I didn't have a question, but I wanted to make a comment about the radiation treatment. My wife was facing multiple drives up to Seattle to get radiation treatments at Kaiser. Thank you for intervening with the doctor there and convincing him to do it. I don't know if our marriage would have survived all those trips to Seattle. It barely survived the ones we had, but it's not fun driving from Olympia to Seattle. It's just a nightmare. So it really, yeah, and the more you can get that information out to the radiologists, I think they'll really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that's one thing that I know in my heart. This is the right thing to do. And you know, does it involve less remuneration to the radiation oncologists? 50 treatment or 25 treatments versus 1. It's not mathematically 25-fold less, but it is less. And then that's maybe a tiny factor in resistance. I think it's mostly that the data is just not out there yet, and we need to get it out there. And then we really need those centers to mindfully explore with us this option, which works well and just is super well tolerated.
We have no more questions in the chat, but I do.
Was there one more in the back? Did you have a question? Yeah, Alex? Yeah, but you were going to say.
I was just going to say Dr. Lobo from Brazil had a suggestion, and then I think it's worth pointing out. He just said to consider hosting in parallel to events like these, an online event aimed at middle or low income countries, focusing on how to manage MCC cases outside of the major centers.
Yeah, we'll be coming back to Dr. Lobo on that. It's a great suggestion, and we'll take ideas as to how to best do that. It's tricky managing obviously any health condition with less resources. Do you have a question?
Yes, good evening. I was research when I was 30. Very ill for about 12, 13, 14 years. And it was a research center in Denver, National Research Center, and they were involved. It's fortunate though. I just want you to know, and all of your team, that I respect and high regard for researchers, you know, because you come into a research team, they don't always have the answer. Like when you go to your basic PCP, allopathic, you know, and they have their purpose too, okay? But when you walk into research, there isn't just a medication dropped on you to say, this is what you have, this will get you well. You know, it's advancing, evolving research, you know, that gets to research. Ever so pleased. And helped advance this throughout the world. So thank you. This is incredible.
Thank you so much. Okay, with that, it's time for photos and food. So if you don't mind, so let's see. Peter, you've got your tripod there. We're going to take a picture going this way of the gang. If you don't want to be in a picture, you can run out right now. This picture will be something that we associate with the launch of our institute. So feel free to stay in and join us. And then after that, it'll be time for food. After we do a picture like this, and Peter's getting set up for it, then we'll ask everybody who wants to be on part of the team, and you can define that as you want. Anybody who wants to be as part of one of our quote collaborators in our collaborative, come down and we'll take a picture facing this way too. Okay.